All right, let's touch on some draft clues that have been laid out. About 10 days before the draft, it is the locker room. You can see me, hear me here, also on S&L. One of the big mysteries of the offseason has been Nick Caley's offense. We have no idea what it's going to look like. We have no idea what it's going to be. And as the draft approaches, some of the things that the Texans have made may have given us some clues. And there may be reason for optimism when it comes to the new offensive coordinator. Appreciate everyone for coming through, whether you're a regular 10:30 at night, 4 o'clock on S&L or whatever. It's just a little special, quick Sunday edition, kind of breaking down some of the things that Nick Caley has laid out for us when it comes to that big mystery. First, I asked Nick Caley at his press conference what his offense is, what it's like, how he uses his players, and this is what the new OC had to say.
Our scheme based on what we do, and I don't say that to throw any curveballs. It really is. I mean, my history dating back to when I first got into the National Football League under Coach Belichick is we were going to be a game plan team. If that meant we were going to run duo and gap schemes and run the ball 45 times to win the game, then that's what we were going to do. If we had to run more perimeter plays, wide zone, and we felt that was going to give us the edge, we were going to do that. It was all going to be based. We were going to ask our guys to do what they do well, but it was going to be based on what we do to help us win. And at the end of the day, we want to win. And that's priority for us.
And game plan offense for someone who's trying to fit square pegs into round holes, that's where it gets a little bit dangerous. That's where it gets a little bit crazy. Yusef asks if this is live. It absolutely is live. It's special edition talking about Nick Caley and some of the context clues, because I'm excited about what Nick Caley can bring. Appreciate everyone for coming through. I hope you're going to be at our draft party, myself and Cody Stutes, S&L. 2 Saturdays from today, the third day of the draft at 11 a.m. We'll be out there at the Karbach Biergarten, right by Pizzas and Pints. So come through, enjoy it. Shout out to all the community, etc. And we'll see how it goes with Nick Caley. Here's where I kind of get excited, though, about Nick Caley. And we've kind of broke this down when there was dialogue about Cooper Kupp. And I'm going to connect this also to the guys who have visited the Houston Texans. And there's kind of a sensitive subject when it comes to the Patriot way, especially around here. And I think because of that, if anyone even stopped it for a flight in New England, then all of a sudden there's like some apathy, there's some skepticism, there's some cynicism when it comes to guys from New England. I think Nick Caserio has done a good job of kind of stepping back from that and allowing DeMeco Ryans to implement what he wants to implement and kind of being a little bit hands-off. I do wonder, though, if with this new offensive system, if Nick Caserio is going to be a little bit more involved. And furthermore, as long as he's incorporating the right things when it comes to the Patriot way, I think that's a good thing for the Texans, and I think it's a damn good thing for DeMeco Ryans. And you look at how Bill O'Brien used to talk about the Patriot way. It was basically him trying to be Belichick and him trying to turn his quarterback into Tom Brady, which is a disaster and something that you can't do. But if you're doing other things that the Patriots did well, then I don't think it's the worst thing. And you heard him talk about player driven. You heard Nick Caley talk about that. I went back to when Caserio was in New England, and I think this was one of the things that I liked most about the New England Patriots. And it was when they had a willingness to use 2 slot receivers, and we saw it with Welker and Edelman. They were starting to do it. And then they were able to adjust to their players. This is the ultimate example of adjusting to players. In the draft, an opportunity is created. You take Rob Gronkowski, and he's there because of injury concerns. And then you take Aaron Hernandez, and he's there because of character concerns. And you put together the best tight end duo, regardless of what happened with Aaron Hernandez, the best tight end duo that we've ever seen. That's adjusting, and that's using multiple guys at the same position after you were kind of doing that in the slot. Then Hernandez got hurt, and they kind of went back to the dual slots. You saw Edelman and you saw Amendola combined for 160 catches and 8 touchdowns. And that kind of continued in 2014. So I think that is a good thing that the Patriots did. I think that's a great example of the Patriot way, and the positive of it is using multiple guys that might play the same position, unorthodox to some that wouldn't be willing to do it. And whether it's two slot guys, whether it's two tight ends, having a willingness to use those guys appropriately. And you might ask, well, what the hell does this have to do with Nick Caley? I'll explain that in a second, because right now it's such a mystery as to what Nick Caley will or won't do. But let's hear some more from Nick Caley about, we heard the offense. He basically said, he didn't say much there. He said it's going to be in, but here's Nick Caley, the new OC of the Texans, re-emphasizing that this is going to be player driven, much like we saw with New England before he got there. Let's hear what he had to say about that.
Coordinator, to answer your second part of the question, really excited to get an opportunity to evolve this scheme and put, it's not going to be my spin. It's going to be what's best for our players. And it's always going to be what's best for our players. No, we're not pounding a square peg into a round hole. It's going to be based on the strengths of our quarterback, the players, and the guys on this team. So that's what it'll always be, designed around.
And that's what he says. And I think that's what he's going to do. And Space City Inc. brings up an obvious point. Tom Brady's not on the Patriots. That's why it's dangerous to copy the Patriot way. But there are specific things from the Patriot way that you can copy. I think they kind of take credit for a lot of stuff that's just common sense. Do your job. Everybody says that. Obviously, Tom Brady makes everyone's job easy. That's Captain Obvious stuff. But their willingness to use guys multiple in the slot, whether it's Wes Welker and Edelman or Edelman and Amendola, and their willingness to use multiple tight ends after using multiple guys in the slot, that is something that you can do for sure, maximizing all skill sets. And then we look at when Nick Caley arrived in New England, and this kind of continued. And we don't know if he's going to call offense the same way, but it kind of continued, so he at least witnessed it. So when Caley arrived, we kind of saw the peak balance of two slot guys. We saw Edelman and Amendola, 60-plus catches each, close to 700 yards each, and 10 combined touchdowns. Then the next year, we saw Edelman doing his thing, and then they tried to go back to the two tight end thing, and they had Martellus Bennett and Gronk. And then as soon as Edelman misses time, you have Amendola with the 61 receptions kind of stepping it up. And we've already talked about what happened when Caley went to the Rams. I think it was one of the ultimate displays of using multiple slots. You saw the Rams do that for a long time, but when Caley got there, they were using Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua multiple at the same time. Not as much as they would have liked because of the Cooper Kupp injuries, but they used it quite often, and it was successful. It was at the top of the league in almost every advanced offensive stat when they would use Puka and Cooper Kupp. And it should also be mentioned they were willing to draft Puka when they had Cooper Kupp. So here's why I think this is relevant now. And you can just use examples. And when it comes to an offensive coordinator, hell, when Bobby Slowick was here, there was, damn it, Bobby, there were some people saying, well, you need to use this guy like Deebo Samuel. This guy needs to be George Kittle. I'm not sitting here saying that. I'm not pointing to someone and saying this guy's Wes Welker. I'm just saying that much like New England and much like what he witnessed, you can see guys that can do similar things, both make impacts, whether it's two slots, whether it's two tight ends, and multiple running backs. And I'll use a game as an example of that in a sec. But let's just look at the offensive players that have visited the Texans. And this is why I think this is overly relevant, because you look at the tight ends that have visited. You have Elijah Arroyo. He's tight end 4 on Dane Brugler's rankings. And then you have Gunnar Helm, who's further down the list. These are two receiving threats. These are vertical threats, both good, very, very good after the catch. Gunnar Helm, despite the poor display of athleticism at the combine, really good after the catch. And Arroyo is one of the more physically gifted tight ends in this draft when it comes to catching. 35% of his catches went for 20-plus yards. And to use that, to put that in perspective, Brock Bowers at Georgia, just 23.3%. not saying he's Brock Bowers. I'm just saying when you talk about that type of explosiveness, 34.3% to 23.3%. And this is a number that Dane Brugler dug up. So Arroyo is one of those tight ends that you can use to catch the rock. Same thing with Gunnar Helm. So when you see that, that looks like a willingness to use multiple tight end sets and use tight ends in multiple ways, much like the Patriots did before Caley got there with Caserio, who we think may have an impact on this offense, and how they did after Caley got there when they tried to go back to it with Martellus Bennett and Rob Gronkowski. Then we look at the wide receivers, and I find this interesting too. Egbuka, obviously, someone that we've spoken of a lot. A lot of people think he's kind of a slot guy. And then you have Jalen Knoll from Iowa State. 70% of his snaps were in the slot. So there does seem to be a willingness to use guys that might line up in the slot a little bit more. But they do have some guys that line up outside at the top. But they are visiting with guys that are in the slot, despite the fact that they have Christian Kirk, who you already think is going to hold that down. So I'm not saying this is going to be a Danny Amendola, Julian Edelman type of vibe. I'm not saying it's going to be Puka and Cooper Kupp, but there is the willingness to entertain the possibility of slot guys, even if you already have a slot guy. And the Knoll comparison that Brugler actually used in the Beast was Christian Kirk. Egbuka would obviously be a first-round guy, but you could probably use him multiple ways. But for the most part, a lot of people think he's a slot. So we've talked about multiple slot guys. We've talked about multiple tight ends. The guys that the Texans are visiting with, they would kind of lead you to believe that that would be perhaps the approach that Nick Caley would be willing to put together. Let's hear from him again, though. We talk about Patriot way gone wrong. We talk about the McVay pipeline. Let's hear what Nick Caley had to say at his press conference about what he learned from each of those guys.
Time in New England, embracing your role, keeping your head down, working hard, and really the more you can do, the more value you have, and just there's no detail that's I would say too small. You turn over every rock. You try to find a way to give yourself an edge as a team through your players, through coaching, etc. And I would say thoroughness, attention to detail, accountability. That's what really stands to mind with Coach Belichick. Sean, same thing, just the energy, the passion, the leadership. Obviously, both men are incredible football coaches, but you talk about the way he goes about the day in LA, the way he moves, the way he communicates, the way he invests, the way he pours into players. Those are just a few things about both those coaches that I've obviously taken along the way.
And that's a lot of the intangible stuff. That's not the hardo stuff. That's not the do your job type of stuff. That's a lot more of like the intangible stuff that you want from a coach. And it doesn't come across as Patriot way gone wrong. You can usually sniff out the wrong way of the Patriot way. You can sniff it out a mile away. There was a little bit of healthy skepticism with Nick Caserio because he kind of had a little bit of that, but there was always the balance of understanding the process, being a little bit more open-minded, not acting like it was his way or the highway. So you kind of felt that with Caserio. When you saw Bill O'Brien, when you saw Matt Patricia, when you saw some of these other guys, Joe Judge that left New England, you could kind of tell that they thought they were Bill Belichick before they were Bill Belichick. And I always incorporate this and compare this to copying the wrong things. You can there's greatness. And there are things that great people do that only they can get away with. And I think for whatever reason, the O'Briens, the Patricias, the other New England guys, the Jack Easterbys, like they thought that they were a little bit more important than they were. And they thought they could act like the Tom Bradys, the Bill Belichicks. And we saw how it went. That's why there's not a very impressive pipeline, very impressive history of this. But Nick Caley kind of has a little bit of a diverse skill set. He has a lot of experience. And as long as you copy the right things in the Patriot way, which, as we've said, I think multiple slot receivers, I think that's a good thing if you can adjust to that. I think multiple tight ends, And I think multiple running backs. And I've been hammering home this running back thing for a long time. And we just talked about the tight end visits and the wide receiver visits and why those are kind of exciting if they're able to kind of incorporate that good area of the Patriot way. But the running back thing makes me even more excited. And this was Nick Caley's 4th year in New England, 2018. And this is always my example of why having multiple running backs is a very valuable thing, and multiple running backs that can make big plays in big games. Right now, the Texans, they only have one running back that can make plays, and it's Joe Mixon. You have Dare Ogunbowale, who's Old Faithful, and you have Dameon Pierce, who, let's just be serious, that's not an RB2. But if you have multiple running backs that can do different things, and you coach your team the right way, when it matters most, they can help you in really, really big games. And I think New England was one of the prime examples of that. I actually think San Francisco did a pretty good job of that when D'Amico was there. But for whatever reason, the running back depth has had neglect. And I'll bring up this 2018 AFC Championship game. And you may or may not remember this game, but this was when the Patriots beat the Chiefs. And this was on January 20th, 2019. So it was after the 2018 season. You look at this, and I'll make it a little bit bigger. But just pull up this box score, and I'm sure a lot of you kind of remember what this thing was like, what this New England team was like. But this was the year where Chris Hogan was arguably the second best receiver on the New England Patriots. You had Philip Dorsett, you had Cardell Patterson, and you had Julian Edelman, who was a good receiver. Right now, the Texans, they have Nico Collins, and they have a bunch of other guys, and there might be some limitations when it comes to the wide receiver room. But if you look at this game in particular, and you just look at the running backs and what the running backs did, Sony Michel had 29 carries for 113 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was a first-round pick that they made when there was talk about positional value and all that type of stuff. But in this game, Sony Michel, 29 carries, 113, 2 touchdowns. Rex Burkhead, he actually had the game winner. He had 12 carries for 41 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then James White was one of your key receivers all season. He had 4 catches for 49 yards, including a huge 30-yard play that set up a score for them. So you look at these 3 running backs right here. All of them contributed, and you had a combined 4 touchdowns and about over 200 yards of total offense from your running backs. And that, to me, is something that the Patriot way, when it comes to the Patriot way, that I think you can copy. You can't copy Tom Brady. And someone in the chat said Tom Brady's not on the Texans. That's true. But we're talking about running backs that these guys aren't superstars. James White, Rex Burkhead, Sony Michel, they weren't relying on Tom Brady. And that's the beauty of the whole thing. That's why Tom Brady is able to win games that a lot of quarterbacks lose, because they weren't relying on Tom Brady. And they weren't trying to force average receivers into making big plays. Like we saw it with Bobby Slowick. If Nico Collins misses time, all of a sudden you see Robert Woods catching bubble screens. Or you see Xavier Hutchinson lining up trying to do what Nico Collins does. Or you see John Mechie trying to do what Tank Dell does. That's not a winning recipe. New England, and I'm sure Tom Brady had a hell of a hand in it, but when they didn't have elite personnel, they had multiple running backs that could make plays. And that's why this is even more exciting for me when it comes to the potential future Texans and the context clues that Nick Caley and D'Amico Ryans may be looking into. So we've talked about the multiple tight ends. Now you look at the running backs. And the running backs, you have 2 guys who are going to be early-ish picks, I would say. I think it's safe to say these guys will be gone in the first 45. One of them probably maybe in the first round. But you have your traditional backs in Quinshad Judkins out of Ohio State, who I've started to like a hell of a lot. I think he can do a lot of things. We've seen him carry the full workload at Ole Miss. Then we saw him share it at Ohio State. He's very smart. I know Yale was on his final list. He doesn't get hurt. I think Judkins is interesting. And then Hampton's one of my favorite guys in the draft. I don't know that he even gets to 25. Then you have Caleb Johnson. Those are kind of your traditional running backs. And then Hunter, you could probably call one. But this is where it gets interesting. And I'm seeing people talk about, well, we need a James White. Yeah, everyone would like a James White. And it looks like the Texans are kind of open to that because these visits right here, the tight end visits tell you that they want to run some 2 tight end sets. If we're just taking these clues on the surface, a lot of times they don't visit with guys and they draft them anyways. But if we're just taking these clues on the surface, they tell you that they want to run 2 tight end sets and they want more explosion. Maybe kind of a perfect like long-term combination of one of these 2 guys in Cade Stover. And with Knoll, they're willing to play, and Egbuka, they're willing to play multiple slots like they did in New England. If you look at Jaden Blue out of Texas, he is primarily his super skill is being a receiver out of the backfield. You saw it against Ohio State. You saw it in big situations. Whenever Texas needed him in big situations, they used him. They didn't always use him consistently. And he's not an every down back. He's someone, he fumbles a lot, but he's someone that has elite receiver skills out of the slot. Go watch the Ohio State game. If you want to see that, watch the A&M game a couple games before that where he caught the fade in the end zone. Rashard Smith's kind of the same type right there out of SMU. And these are guys that are mid-round picks, maybe even day 3 picks, probably. And they're not like the other guys that are going to go early. So when you look at the example that I used about the New England Patriots, and you look at the running backs that they're visiting with, this is music to my ears. This is one of the most beautiful things that I've laid my eyes on in a long, long time. This looks like a team that understands finally, D'Amico, Caserio, Caley, that you need multiple backs to make big plays in games. You can have your guy that can run it between the tackles for 100 yards like Sony Michel, Joe Mixon. You can have someone that can spell him and maybe find the end zone a couple of times. Rex Burkhead, Quinshon Judkins, Omarion Hampton, although the upside of those guys is definitely higher. And then you have your guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield, James White, and Brashard Smith and Jaden Blue. All the while perhaps running multiple slots and multiple tight ends. This is the only clues that we have to go off of. Some will say, well, how can you connect this? I think it's easy to connect. I think it's very easy to connect these things, and it's easy to get excited. Now, in a perfect world, maybe the Texans are able to trade for some more picks, whether that's trading back in round 1, trading back whenever, and they're able to put all this together. But this right here, what you look at, this looks like what you want skill position wise. This looks like what you want skill position wise. Now I can already see it in the chat and I completely understand it 100%. And there's also a visit with Tyler Booker who would probably warrant a first round pick. Everyone's saying, what about the offensive line? And that is a very fair question. What about the offensive line? That's another thing from the Patriot way that would be great to copy. You can't copy Belichick. You can't copy Brady. I think you can copy multiple backs. I think you can copy multiple slots. And I think you can copy, or not even copy, just value, because I think it's a good value. You can value those things. But the other thing when it comes to the offensive line is teaching. And better teaching, putting guys in better position, and allowing the skill position guys to get the ball in their hands without asking these offensive linemen to do too much. And that's another thing that Nick Caley has, because he learned from the GOAT. He learned from the best offensive line coach of all time. So this is Nick Caley talking about who taught him about offensive line play, who taught him to teach blocking, This is what Nick Caley had to say about that.
You know, I was with Dave DeGuglielmo in 2015. Very good coach. Dante Scarnecchia, longtime New England coach, influenced a lot of, you know, what I've obviously learned up front in the protection systems. And then, you know, been a part of other ways of doing it too. But yeah, in terms of my, you know, the formative stages, it would be, you know, my early years in New England, obviously, with those two.
And obviously Tom Brady's one of the best resources that an offensive line coach can have when you can see the field like that. But that there is talking about teaching. That is talking about mindset. And the one thing they didn't have in New England, they didn't have diva offensive linemen. They didn't have that. I've heard Ted Johnson talk about that. I've heard a lot of guys talk about that. That's kind of what Cole Popovich is about. That Cole Popovich left there for stuff out of his control. He stood up for what he believed in, and he left New England. So, you know, there seems to be, and it's really, really interesting because I'm not generalizing, but there is a feeling of, oh my God. And I think at the time it was there. I was making fun of it more than anyone on the flagship station, making fun of the Patriot way, and Jack Easterby, the POS. And we ended up running him out of town. But there's a natural like skepticism and eye roll when you hear about the Patriot way. But then when we talk about the offensive line, there seems to be like a notion or a feel that, well, you got to invest heavily in the offensive line. I mean, if you're going to use your first round, I mean, you need to use your first 2 picks on the offensive line. You've got to go offensive line. What the hell do you think they've been doing for the last half decade? Obviously, maybe there's like some sort of better evaluation that's going to start happening. But there's new guys in town that are looking at this offensive line. And it's 2 guys who've worked with guys who know what the hell they're doing on the offensive line. And maybe these guys, this would be one of the best things. This would be even better than, or it'd be a perfect mix with the multiple slots, the multiple tight ends, and the multiple running backs. But these guys might know how to actually coach guys up and not put them in bad positions, and maybe develop some continuity and some resemblance of a synchronized unit on the offensive line. This organization has been investing in the offensive line heavily. This is not an Andrew Luck situation where they just ignore the offensive line, they ignore the offensive line, they ignore the offensive line, and then all of a sudden there's a problem. That's not what's happened. What's happened with the Texans is they've invested heavily. They made the Tunsil trade, 2 firsts and a 2nd round pick for Laramie Tunsil and Kenny Stills, who the Dolphins were going to end up cutting anyways. They made him the 2-time highest paid offensive lineman of all time. They drafted Titus Howard that same year in the 1st round. They made him one of the highest paid right tackles in the NFL. They drafted Kenyon Green in the 1st round. They drafted Juice Scruggs in the 2nd round, traded up to do that. They traded for Shaq Mason. They made Shaq Mason one of the highest paid guards. So it's not as simple as you invest in the offensive line and all of a sudden the offensive line's good. I'm sure you can point to examples, but I would argue that the way in which they're coached and the skill position guys are just as important. So yeah, you would love to have great elite offensive linemen, but just because you invest heavily or just because you draft guys in the 1st round doesn't necessarily make for a recipe for a good offensive line. So we'll see what happens with that, but I do think that needs to be mentioned and at least acknowledged when we're talking about this. But this list of guys, this tells you that they're open to the 2 tight end sets. They feel that they need more explosion from the tight end position. That's the only reason you talk to those 2 guys. The wide receiver position, they're entertaining the possibility of taking Egbuka in the 1st round. I don't know that any outside of Golden, I don't know that Golden's going to be there. I don't know any of those warrant that. Maybe you would have to take Connerly in the first. But this resembles a team that might be going all offense in the draft. And I think the other clue that you have of that is on top of common sense, in that the defense is so much superior to the offense. I feel like D'Amico's gotten his fix at this point, right? Like, we joke around, we call him D'Amico, no offense. And we see how good the defense is in every area. They have what the offense lacks. But, I mean, look at this offseason. You've given Danielle Hunter an extension, a 1-year extension, one of the highest in the league. You traded for C.J. Gardner-Johnson. You brought in 16,000 defensive linemen. You made Jalen Petrie the highest paid nickel in the league, which is interesting because this draft actually, like, finding guys like that, like safeties that can play nickel, it's actually a hell of a draft for that. Even in day 3, there are some very intriguing guys that can do that type of thing, but they saw enough value in a guy who's done it for 10 games to make him the highest paid nickel. But they've invested heavily now in the defense, and it is a return on investment. But at this point, with all these clues, with what we know about Nick Caley, with what we've seen from this defense, with what we know that this team needs, you got to think this is an all-offensive draft. And they're going to be open to a lot of things. And those are really the pre-draft clues for sure. And I'm sure there'll be a secondary market look too, but in the draft, got to go offense. For sure. You got to go offense. And there's massive opportunity when it comes to running back, and there's good opportunity when it comes to tight end. And maybe you use some of those bonus picks on that. But the good things to copy from the Patriot way, multiple slots, multiple tight ends, and multiple running backs. You're not going to create Tom Brady. You're not going to be the next Bill Belichick. But there are a lot of things that they did that you can copy. And those are the things that you hope that they copy. I always tell the story about Bill O'Brien going into the film room the first time with the Texans and saying, this is how Randy Moss did it. This is how Wes Welker did it. You know, blah, 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 blah. This was Gronk and all this. You didn't have that. That's idiotic. But when you can say we're gonna start off running with multiple slots here and have them being the top 2 receivers in the league, and then all of a sudden you pivot to 2 tight ends, and then you have running backs who are doing a number of things, you can copy that. I think that can be copied, and that's a good thing. And it would have been nice if that would have been what Bill O'Brien and some of these other Patriot guys copied. But they tried to copy the wrong things. So I think this Patriot way, if you merge it in with what McVay does and what he learned, I think it's going to be, I think it can be intriguing. And I think what we've seen between Nick Caley getting hired and the draft in less than 2 weeks, I think that combination should make you a little bit excited to see what he does. The other thing is, and this is just the reality of what just happened with the Texans, we don't know how Nick Caley's going to adjust. Bobby Slowick started out pretty good.
Damn it, Bobby.
Till he didn't. So he probably doesn't even know what the hell he's going to do. But if he's going to adjust to players like the Patriots did, that's great. You're not going to turn C.J. Stroud into Tom Brady, and you're not going to be Bill Belichick. But all of these clues are nice. Donnie says you need to take a DT in the top 3 rounds. Why? Or what? Why? Because why? I don't agree with that. I mean, maybe if there's someone there, I don't think you need it. Like in the top 3, why? I know that there's good value. I think there's probably good value day 3. Like, can the offense have any weaknesses? I mean, the defense. I don't think you need to take a DT in the first 3 rounds. I think D'Amico Ryans has shown he's able to make it work with defensive tackles. He's also shown that they have one of the better edge duos in the league, which is going to make it better. So no, I don't think you have to do that at all. Don't agree. You got to give a little bit, D'Amico. You got to give a little bit to the offense. Because that's the other thing. Like, if you have a defensive coach that's going to coach everyone up, give the offense some sort of bone. You just traded Laramie Tunsil. Got to do a little bit of something on the offense. I don't think you need to draft a D lineman in the first 3 rounds. Maybe if there's an opportunity, figure something out. But I don't think you're married to that. But the defense is also a superpower, and that's another thing that it gets kind of ignored is if you have an elite defense, it kind of hires the margin of error for the offense, which is good news for CJ Stroud and company. That's clearly going to be the superpower is the defense. But do they need more firepower on defense? Do they need to use any of their day 1 or 2 picks? I would say probably not. Probably not. But if you look at this and you look at the path, Egbuka is a first rounder and Matthew Golden's a first rounder. Hampton's a first rounder, maybe. And then Booker might be either as well. So you take those potential first round picks and then you sprinkle in what these other guys would do. If you get Egbuka in the first round, you're probably not going wide receiver day 2. So maybe you keep your fingers crossed that you end up getting a Judkins, and then you might have to take Arroyo in the 3rd. Or maybe Gray Zabel's there in the 2nd. So that's kind of there. The later on guys, that's where you're looking at the Blue, the Smith, and the Helm. If you want to try to put this puzzle together. Now, I think last year, the top 30 visits, I actually think a large majority of the guys, they visited them with them at different times, but they didn't necessarily visit with them on top 30 visits. If you're trying to put that together. But the defense is going to be fine. There's very little like this is if the Texans had to play tomorrow, I think you probably have a top 5 defense. Do you probably need some corner depth and some more bodies? Yes. Could you use some more D tackle bodies? Sure. And then you sprinkle in undrafted guys, late draft picks, maybe secondary market guys, and you can figure something out. But your defense is good to go. Your offense needs some more pieces. And I think your draft equity and the guys that we're talking about, I think it actually lines up nicely. Now, is it going to be an explosive offense? No, probably not. There might be elements of it. But there is possibility, especially with the right coaching, for this team to figure some stuff out. There's definitely some possibility to figuring some stuff out. As far as centers, I don't know what I don't know a lot about the centers. Seth McLaughlin, I don't know much about the centers. I know Majors is kind of one of the intangible guys from Texas. That's one of the guys they visited with. He's not going to play guard, but as far as the other centers, your guess is as good as mine. And I don't know that Juice Scruggs is guaranteed to be on the spot either. I know what Nick Caley and Popovich think about him. I think his spot on this roster is very much up in the air, and it's going to have to be a lot better. We've seen Ross Blacklock be 2 years and done. And I think there's kind of similar feel with what Juice Scruggs has given you, with what former TCU defensive tackle Ross Blacklock gave you in the O'Brien Easterby era. I don't know that it's a guarantee that Juice Scruggs is there, or if he symbolizes what they can and can't do. There hasn't been anything that has stuck out to where you feel 100% certain about Juice Scruggs. But the multiple running backs is something that needs to happen. That to me is the non-negotiable. I think that's one of the most important things. And this is the other thing about it. If this were last year's wide receiver draft, you'd be feeling pretty good. If it were the year before, you'd probably be feeling pretty good. But if there's not opportunity to get prime wide receivers, what is the way that you make up with for it? We talked about it with the Nick Caley thing. We talked about that 2018 AFC Championship game that I obsess over. Kevin Hogan was their second receiver. And I get the Tom Brady thing. Kevin Hogan was their second wide receiver. And they were using multiple slot guys. They were using running backs. They were using running backs as receivers. And they were mixing stuff up. So sometimes you're not able to do. And that was another term that I thought D'Amico used, that I thought it was a shot at Bobby Slowick.
Damn it, Bobby.
Thought it was a direct shot at Bobby Slowick when he said, we're not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. If you just draft a wide receiver just to draft a wide receiver because he's the best one available, you're making a mistake. All drafts aren't the same. And that's the mistake that gets made sometimes when we start breaking down the draft. It's, well, they need a receiver. Well, they need an offensive lineman. Well, they need a D tackle. Well, is wide receiver, especially sitting at 25 and where you're at, is that good value? If Egbuka falls to you, perhaps. If you like Luther Burden, perhaps. If T-Mac or Golden falls to you, perhaps. There's some opportunity in the second round, but it might not be the case. You don't go to every restaurant and order ribeye. You at least look at the menu and see what they have. We a lot of times when we talk about the draft, we say, well, what do they need? Well, now they need to draft this. And then you ask the guy, some of the most respected voices, you say, well, which guy? Well, I don't know. Just take one. Okay. Obviously, there's probably someone that's going to be a good player, but just take one? How's that going to work? We don't look at drafts as if it's different, like it really is, where it's different menus. It's a more clear picture when we're talking about quarterbacks, because you can tell when you're in no man's land and you need a quarterback. A lot of teams are finding that out right now. Indianapolis, they had to bring in Daniel Jones. Why'd they bring in Daniel Jones? Because they knew what this draft was at quarterbacks. If this was the draft 2 years ago and Indianapolis was selecting second, hell, if this was last year's draft and Indianapolis was drafting second, you think they bring in Daniel Jones? No, they don't. But they did because it wasn't available. Why would wide receiver, tackle, all this other stuff, why would that not be different than the most important position? Sometimes it's like that. It would be great if you could get an elite offensive lineman at 25. Someone could end up being that's drafted rounds later. But that's not how the draft looks. They need to draft a D. We had it earlier in the chat. They need to draft a D lineman in the first 3 rounds. Who? This isn't like an elite D line draft. There's some value for sure. But who? We know what they need. They need offense. And there's a lot of options there. And that's based on actual names, not just need. If you could draft like that and you could just say, okay, give me an elite blank. Yeah, wide receiver, let's do it. Not that easy. Give me an elite tackle. Not that easy. Rich Boy J on the super chat says, how much more confident would you be in our offense if Tank was healthy this year? Look, Tank was not producing very well last year. And a lot of that could have been, damn it, Bobby, but he wasn't producing that well. But let's just be serious. You feel better because you have someone who can be a quality NFL receiver, and he's going to be in a different system, and there's probably some excitement. You'd be much more confident. And quite frankly, I think the Stephon Diggs thing, the reason that they were willing to make Stephon Diggs a rental and the reason they were willing to, treat it like a credit card and push the contract back, I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that they had Tank Dell. So life would be much easier with Tank Dell, whether he's producing at a high level or not. And we saw him in the Kansas City game. He started kind of finding his groove. But they did not anticipate the Tank Dell thing. You couldn't expect him to. But that is part of the reason why the wide receiver position just completely blew up in such a short time. You go from last year talking about, is this going to be the best wide receiver group in the league? And, there's the three-headed monster and all that. Now, I mean, top to bottom, it's one of the most unimpressive wide receiver groups. The Tank Dell thing is absolutely a reason for that. They didn't plan for that. You can't really plan for someone to have a season ending and then maybe the next season ending injury. So yeah, you would be a lot more confident with Tank Dell. You'd feel good. I don't know whether that mean they would still get Kirk or not, but yeah, obviously that kind of blew up their plans. Because I think they anticipated, okay, we're going to have Tank Dell for 2 more years on the rookie deal. We're going to have Nico Collins. His extension kicks in, and then we're going to see what happens with Stephon Diggs. And torn ACL for Diggs, terrible injuries for Tank Dell, and that's where you're at wide receiver. So they didn't plan for that. And I think they just anticipated that regardless, you're going to have a good player. So yeah, it would be very nice if they had Tank Dell. Very nice. I do, though, give D'Amico Ryans credit and Nick Caserio, and I guess they collaborated on these, obviously, but their willingness to make the tough decisions in the offseason pertaining to the offense, I think they deserve a ton of credit for that. And there was decent doubt that D'Amico would fire Bobby Sloak. We had no idea. Now, started calling for it here and on S&L, started calling for him to be fired, but we didn't know if he was going to do it or not. Kind of a kick the can type down the road type of situation. But I think what they learned about him is he wasn't really a leader of men. He'd never even led a position group. Wasn't good at adjusting. And there was the square peg round hole. But he was willing to make that decision, and he fired Bobby Sloak. Next decision he made was they traded Laremy Tunsil. Now they can say, and the reality is it eventually was going to happen, but they can say it was all logistics and we wanted to pay other guys and all this. But I mean, that's a pretty suspect area, and I support the move. I mean, myself and Cody Stutes were questioning the Laremy Tunsil thing for a while. That wasn't like a after the fact type of thing. Like, we were questioning this for a while, how this was working and how this was going to work. And who knows if that was a Nick Caley thing? Who knows if Cole Popovich had a say in it? But it was a ballsy decision to say the very least. And I think if you look at the moves that they've made since then, when it comes to finances, Derek Stingley, who's one of their culture guys, highest paid corner in the league. Danielle Hunter, extension, not even really one of those young guys. Danielle Hunter, extension that happens to kick in on what would have been the final year of Laremy Tunsil's contract. And then Jalen Petrie, highest paid nickel corner, whatever the hell you want to call him, linebacker, safety, but nickel corner for the sake of the salary talk. They paid him. Those are all 3 culture guys. Is this a Nick Caley thing? I'm sure he had an opinion, right? I'm sure Cole Popovich had some sort of opinion. Does that resemble what they think or what the culture is? Don't know. But that would be interesting. Rob on the super. He's got 3. He's got a lot to say. They do, Landry. Thanks for giving them their flowers on that. I was the one calling for it in LT as well. Not sure what it is, but gotcha. I guess he's talking about the offseason. He says, Nick has cooked this offseason for real, looking at the future most even he can. Yeah, I'm drinking out of the wife's cup. The wife's cups are always the bigger ones, man. This is almost damn near a flower thing. Drink out of that. Drink out of that. Best mom ever. I feel like I got her that cup just for myself. So yeah, I've been doing that. Speaking of drinking out of cups, we want y'all at Karbach Brewing. The 3rd day of the draft. We're going to celebrate. We're going to talk. We're going to break bread. It's going to be just like this. It's going to be fun. We'll probably do a live stream at the end of it, but pizza, beer in the beer garden, 11 a.m. I know they have a draft party on Thursday. Dude, it's going to be a weekday. It's downtown. It's a pain in the ass. Go to the best place in town with the best streamers in town, best media, best radio guys in town, myself and Cody Stutes, 11 a.m. We'll hang out. We'll drink beer. We'll eat pizza, and it'll be fun. We'll enjoy it very much. And it'll be very, 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 very fun. But I'm intrigued by this Nick Caley. I'm intrigued by these names. Very intrigued by these names. The 2 running backs is my dream scenario. If you get Judkins and Blue or Judkins and Smith, along with Mixon, I think you can do some damage. Arroyo. Get him as your second tight end, because I think if we're looking at the long-term pairing, I think you're pairing Cade Stover with one of those top guys. I think Cade Stover's blocking improves. I think his strength improves. I think they probably like him. And the fact that they're visiting with these guys kind of tells you that they feel like they can complement him. And then you just try to get whatever you can out of Schultz this year. Rob says he's coming through the party. Appreciate y'all. Go ahead and get that. People talking about the intro and outro music. Engineer. I don't think much of it. I think it's fine. It's kind of catchy. I wasn't trying to win Academy Award. Nah, Stutes has got your beers. Tell him what's up. Robert can't drink. He'll probably be drinking a water, and he probably won't get a pizza. He'll probably eat a Caesar salad. So much of a cornball he is. Rob will be there eating a Caesar salad and probably bringing his own like water jug or something, saying he worked out. It's all good though. If you're doing that, come on through. We can figure that out. Donnie says he's in Maine. Won't be there. It's all good. It's all good. Rich Boy Jay says he'll record me a new intro for free. All right. I want to hear what it sounds like. Send it to landry.locker@gmail.com. Let me know what it is. If you want to replace the grifty one, then yeah, just let me know what it is. We'll check it out. I didn't play the intro coming in today. Sometimes we play it, sometimes we don't. Joseph says he's coming through. Thank you. We'll have fun, man. We had fun last time. And this is at Karbach. Karbach brings it. It's going to be outdoors. Got the shade. The pizza place looks badass too. It's called Pizza and Pints if y'all want to check that out. So we'll click that. Yeah, Robert Martinez, man. He's going to come in with like a milk jug of water. Not Rob. Ain't no one bite. Everybody knows the rules. You got to eat the whole thing. Be fun. We appreciate y'all for coming through. I'll check out this Rich Boy. I'll give you a chance to do the new intro. It'll be fun. But they got a new OC. To go back to this, Nick Caley. Remember, multiple backs, multiple slots, multiple receivers. Don't threaten me with a good time. Coach up the offensive linemen. D'Amico, You can keep the O, but let this be an offensive draft. We can't do too much more defense, my friend. We got to help CJ a little bit. And then there's a lot of uncertainty. Super stream with myself and Cody Stutes. Day 1, day 2. Then the party, 11 a.m., Karbach Biergarten on Saturday. And we'll see you there. Locker room still going through. We're still going to have the night stream as well. It's going to be a long, 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 long time. Is Karbach green friendly? I think anywhere is green friendly if you can figure out what you want to figure out. Asking me stuff that I don't know that I can answer. Is it green friendly? Everything's green friendly. Everything, but yeah, come through. Appreciate everyone for coming through. Last year was pretty packed. This one will be more packed, and we'll have fun. We'll all BS, talk, chat. It's what we like to do, no doubt. Appreciate y'all for coming through. Subscribe, like. Remember, like the damn video, and let me know. Are you intrigued by this Nick Caley possibility? The clues, all that when it comes to the multiple slots, multiple tight ends, and we look forward to seeing you next Saturday. Myself and Cody Stutes. We got the pop-ups. We'll be live. And we'll have a lot of stuff. We got some stuff to give away as well. We ain't going to come empty-handed. So appreciate y'all for coming through. Always remember when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together. Here's the intro and the outro for now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the Locker Room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey. Locker Room. Yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk, yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize, every angle's what we really do. We the source, we the pulse of the city too. Landlocked, got the game in the headlock. Localize every time, can't stop, won't stop. Yeah, we top 2 and we not too. Plugged in daily digital on YouTube. We got taste for days.